Action for Climate Justice and the Parliament of the World's Religions. My name is Kehkashan. I am the founder-president of Green Hope Foundation, also a co-lead of the Action Coalition on Feminist Action for Climate Justice and trustee of the Parliament of the World's Religions. So I'm really delighted to be your moderator for today's side event, which is really on a topic that is very important to just how we continue life on Earth. We are living in very unprecedented times, as our panelists here will elaborate on today, where we are facing and bearing the brunt of the triple planetary crisis, where we have climate change hitting us from one end, biodiversity loss, pollution, and yet we only have ourselves to blame for the state that we found ourselves in, because it's due to our myopia, our inertia, or procrastination that we've kind of ended up in a world where we are just depleting our natural ecosystems. We are causing species to just go extinct 100 times faster than they would without human intervention. We are not only impacting our planet, but we are impacting ourselves as well because of this biodiversity loss. And now that brings us to the other aspect of the title of our event today, which is faith, where we have 80% of the world who do adhere to some kind of faith. But it kind of goes beyond that, because every single religion, every single belief, spirituality, or even just our basic ethics all call for taking care of Mother Nature, understanding that we as human beings must live symbiotically with nature in order to really create a new world order where every single person, every single living being has a life of dignity. So today I'm really delighted to introduce our eminent panelists who are coming to us from very different fields, but will all be speaking on this very important topic on faith and biodiversity, and just how important it is for all of us to work towards biodiversity conservation using this faith-based, ethics-based, and value-based approach. So, without any further ado, I shall now pass it on to our panelists. The first speaker I would like to invite is Rosalind Helfand from the UN Women Action Coalition on Feminist Action for Climate Justice. Rosalind, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Kehkashan. So my name is Rosalind Helfand, and as Kehkashan just said, I'm the thematic lead of UN Women's Feminist Action for Climate Justice Action Coalition. And I should note that Green Hope Foundation is a leader of this coalition. We have a leadership group. And this coalition was founded in 2021 as part of the Generation Equality Forum by UN Women, of which there are 6 action coalitions that are not only multi-sectoral, but multi-stakeholder, with a tremendous emphasis on youth and grassroots leadership, and we're very global. And I think one thing that has really come to the forefront for this action coalition is how intersectional these issues are. So Kehkashan talked about the triple crisis of climate, biodiversity, and pollution. And for us, it's climate, biodiversity, pollution, and it's also talking about equity, gender equality as very critical to this discussion. Women, girls, youth are also often at the forefront of the biodiversity crisis and the climate crisis. They are often most highly impacted by climate disasters. They are working the land around the world. They are in care positions, and they are highly at risk for gender-based violence when we suffer disaster. And as we know, the climate crisis and the biodiversity crisis are intimately linked together, and so we must address them together. We really have a stake in this discussion when we're talking about biodiversity. We have a stake in the climate discussion, has a stake in the biodiversity discussion, and as Feminist Action for Climate Justice Coalition members, we have a stake in bringing the gender equality lens to this discussion, because these are intersectional. And that means we want to make sure that we have a really strong gender plan of action, obviously, that it is integrated throughout the global biodiversity framework, that is gender responsive, and that we are ensuring that when countries go home and they are talking about their NBSAs and their national biodiversity strategies and action plans, and making this a part of their local efforts, that they're really integrating that gender equality lens, and that they're doing it in such a way that they are bringing together the climate and biodiversity topics, and that they are really thinking about who's on the front line, right? The youth, women on the front line, and as I said, people taking care of the land, people who are frontline defenders, and indigenous women, and that we are ensuring that there is a place for them in the conversation, in these decision-making forums, and that we're really being given this opportunity to make a difference. And I'll pass it on. Thank you. Sorry, apologies.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rosalind, for speaking on that very important topic, and particularly bringing in the gender perspective to this discussion. And we often find it very strange, particularly, for example, when we work in the communities, that these are people who very readily discriminate against both the environment and women, but at the same time they worship deities that where it's the woman who takes care of the land. They see the earth mother as the divine deity, and it's a woman, but they still readily discriminate against both. So thank you very much for bringing the gender perspective, because that is very much needed when we're speaking about faith and biodiversity. So, and thank you for bringing in also just the perspective of how important it is that countries in their targets implement all of these the faith, biodiversity, and gender plans in their targets and action plans. So with that, I shall pass it on to our next speaker, Sasha Alexander, Senior Policy Officer of the UN Convention to Combat Desertification. Sasha, you have the floor.
Great, thank you very much. So I will present the land perspective, land and livelihoods perspective. And we talk about a triple crisis, or the convergent crisis. Land is the link between species and carbon. So climate change and biodiversity, land is the primary focus, or the most effective way that we can realize multiple benefits from our interventions and from our solutions, nature-based solutions. So the UNCCD has the objective of helping countries and communities with sustainable land and water management. And for us, it's very clear that leaving a healthy and productive legacy is what we mean by sustainable land and water management. We know biodiversity underpins this intergenerational transfer of ecosystem services, and these services sustain all life on the planet. So while we take a secular and evidence-based approach, and we definitely recognize the need for respect and responsibility so that we can indeed pass on a healthy legacy. So this approach that we take is coherent with many of the faith-based teachings and worldviews out there from around the world. We promote traditional land management practices, traditional knowledge and innovation systems, and these are often embedded in many cultures and religions around the world. For example, if we take the case of Bhutan, Sikkim, and other parts of Southeast Asia, we see that there's a commitment to organic or regenerative agriculture. And this is an extension of the Buddhist cosmology. And humans are seen as as an extension or an essential part of biodiversity. So these teachings really look at the integration of nature and livelihoods, and what's most important is that the political and economic dimensions of life are not separate from the spiritual and the religious viewpoints that they take. So we can go around the world and we can find many other similar types of worldviews, 7 generations ahead, Mother Earth, Gaia. It has many different, there are many different ways to express that worldview of living in harmony. It's a long-term vision of living in harmony with Mother Nature. It's also conscious living. And here's where the solutions that we will need if we are to survive on this planet as a human species. It's conscious living that recognizes the causal links between human activities and environmental outcomes. These are the links that we see very, very clearly from consumption to production. We see that our purchasing power, our consumer behavior surges down the supply chain, and it affects the way we produce, we manage our natural resources. So we would also argue that that this consciousness can be acted upon outside the framework of religion or spirituality. And this is through knowledge, through evidence, and through ethics. So this is the heart of what we see as the land restoration agenda. And we, as one of the Rio Conventions, with biodiversity and climate change as our 2 sisters, we need to take a coherent and a complementary approach, because we cannot solve the biodiversity crisis today, the land degradation crisis tomorrow, and then climate change the day after. It's just not possible. We have to do this hand in hand, and so these are some of the issues that we as a secretariat are working on with the other 2 secretariats, but we also need the country parties to sign on and to take this this joined up approach. So finally, I would just say that we can all contribute, regardless of our status, our denomination, our gender. It's a matter of having the awareness, promoting the right education, and that's what's going to get us to the point where we are truly fulfilling the Sustainable Development Goals. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sasha, for bringing in the land perspective. I think land is often forgotten when we're speaking about biodiversity or climate or like any other environmental issue, which is so strange given that it's quite literally the earth that we live on, thrive in. One word that really stood out to me was when you said respect. I think respect for our biodiversity, for our planet, that's something that we as humanity have been missing for quite some time, which is very strange because, as you mentioned, a lot of communities still have their very traditional practices in terms of taking care of their land, and that definitely calls for respect. But somehow we as humanity have gotten disconnected so much from nature that we just move to exploit it instead of working to respect it, and that is something a lot of traditional land-based communities have worked to maintain, and which is why it's so important to listen to those teachings. So thank you once again. We shall now give the floor to our next panelist, who will bring in a more interfaith perspective, speaking on behalf of the Parliament of the World's Religions, my fellow trustee at the Parliament, Kusmita Pedersen. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Kekashan. So, as just mentioned, the Parliament of the World's Religions is an interfaith organization, as the name indicates. And so we are concerned not with this or that individual religious tradition, community. Okay. We are open and inclusive, and all are welcome to the Parliament in a non-official or private capacity. We're not an officially representative council of religions, and are open to all religions, spiritual paths, and ethical convictions. Now, since the 1970s at least, there's been very extensive research on the teachings of the world's religions on the environmental crisis. And what has been discovered in this research is that the world's faith traditions share a common vision. With some qualifications, there's a convergence and agreement on the basic points of what you might call religious environmental ethics. And the Parliament has published with the Faith for Earth initiative of the UN Environment Program, or UNEP, a book, Faith for Earth, A Call for Action. And included in this book is a summary of the points of agreement in environmental ethics. And I'm going to refer to them. And our book, Faith for Earth, is a expanded version of a book that UNEP published in the year 2000. And this powerful consensus or agreement has been published by UNEP not once, not twice, but three times. And based on the research, these are how the traditions agree based on their scriptures and commentaries and practices. The natural world has value in and of itself, inherent value and dignity. The natural world does not exist to serve human needs. And there's a continuity of being or existence between human beings and the rest of the natural world. We're not separate, there's a continuity of being, and this can be experienced. And the world's religious traditions, most people, I think, do experience this continuity or oneness spontaneously, especially if they're in the midst of nature. But the traditions also recommend that you cultivate it, you open yourself to it, you experience this oneness. And non-human living beings, and even those that are conventionally not called living, but are included among the beings of nature, such as mountains, rivers, they have their own value in God's eyes, if you use theistic language, or in the cosmic order. And they have a specific position and role to play in God's eyes or the cosmic order. And so we should adopt and practice the rituals that offer gratitude to the natural world in place before us the meaning and value of the different elements in the natural world. Human beings are obliged to treat nature with respect, not to destroy, not to waste. There are legitimate uses of nature and there are illegitimate uses of nature. And so this common vision that is shared by our traditions should be part of the message. For example, the statement that has been created by the Faith and Biodiversity Coalition that is housed here in this Faith Pavilion and has been transmitted to the state's parties of the framework. That our communities agree is something that should strengthen and enhance our advocacy as well as our partnership, and I think I should leave it there.
Thank you so much, Kusumita, for bringing in that interfaith perspective, sharing the Parliament of the World's Religions work in this regard, and absolutely every single religion and spiritual order, and even the indigenous beliefs have similar iterations of the fact that we as human beings are stewards of our planet. It is our responsibility to take care of it, to not exploit it, and there are legitimate and illegitimate uses of nature, and it's important for us to know which one is which and not just focus on the exploitation and the illegitimate side. So thank you very much for bringing that in. Our next speaker.
Sorry. The earliest memories that I have of my relationship to nature are the warm summer days I spent in the pine forest of Sweden. And I remember the touch of the pine cones that I was playing with, making farm animals. I remember the sound of mosquitoes and birds, and I remember the smell, that smell of warm earth, of pine earth. And so those were very strong memories, but I also had very strong early memories of faith. They were of faith in existence, somewhere beyond only material existence. They were memories of faith in a loving force behind creation. And growing up, my faith deepened in that loving force behind creation, that all-loving and all-knowing creator, and in a faith that this creator always guides humanity in her journey towards, from childhood through adolescence and towards adulthood, with all the pain and suffering that she goes through on that journey. But my faith also grew in really the noble character of man, of humans, and the noble character of the human soul. And it was really this faith that saved me years later. It saved me from despair. It didn't save me from tears, but it saved me from despair when I was walking in a similar pine forest in Eastern Europe. And I all of a sudden realized that the trees were half dead because of acid rain. And as a biology student, that really pained me, but I also had that deep faith that we can reverse our course as humanity because we have that innate noble character. So I think the relationship that each of us have with nature is unique. It's formed by our experiences, by our culture, by our faith. And I think we have collectively come to understand now that we can value, cherish, and celebrate nature in different ways, for different reasons. And for example, in my worldview is theocentric. It's not biocentric. I see the ultimate goal of a human soul to come closer to its creator. But this closeness really depends on my ability to nurture and grow those innate good qualities, those virtues that we have. But that theocentric worldview doesn't mean that nature is something unimportant to me, or that nature stands in way for my spiritual development. Quite the opposite. Nature holds a very strong significance in my faith, as in all the other faiths. Nature is the embodiment of the Creator's names and attributes. And nature has so much to teach us. The natural world offers us insight into our mutual interdependence between each other as humans and between us and the natural world. And it has so many other lessons for our material and spiritual development. A very personal example is that I struggled a bit growing up with understanding this virtue of humility. When you're a teenager and you're lack of self-confidence, and then your faith tells you that humility is a virtue and gratefulness is a virtue, and how should I understand that? And then I read these words of Baha'u'llah. Every man of discernment, while walking upon the earth, feeleth indeed abashed, inasmuch as he is fully aware that the thing which is the source of his prosperity, his wealth, his might, his exaltation, his advancement and power is, as ordained by God, the very earth which is trodden beneath the feet of all men. So suddenly for me that was so clear that nature, indeed the earth we walk on, is our best teacher in humility and in gratefulness. And so in this rich garden of humanity that we are part of, we have all these diverse worldviews and relationships with nature, and this is good. What really matters is that we come to grow and value nature and each other much, much, much more than we do today. To the extent that we are even willing to make sacrifices. Maybe a word that is taboo in these kind of negotiations, but it may take sacrifices in our habits and in our everyday life for it to change, our way of thinking, our way of taking decisions, our short-sighted ways that you were hinting at earlier, of both deciding and acting. So it is the much, much stronger valuing of nature and each other as members of one common human family that is the foundation for that transformative change that scholars are asking for, that activists are asking for, that decision makers are asking for. And as Baha'u'llah stated already in the 19th century, this span of earth is but one homeland and one habitation. It behooveth you to abandon vainglory, which causes alienation, and to set your hearts on whatever will ensure harmony. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sylvia, for bringing in the Baha'i perspective. And what really stood out to me was when you said that what we see in nature, it's really God manifesting, and we very often, a lot of people would very readily just go and worship the creator, but then they would also readily exploit nature, and that's just so strange because it is that very faith that tells them it's the trees, it's the birds, plants, animals that are all of God's creation. So I'm really glad you brought that up, that even whether we are people of faith or not, it's just our biodiversity is something that it's a blessing, really, and it's important for us to be able to take care of that and understand just how interconnected we are with that. So thank you once again. So our next speaker will be joining us online. She was very kind enough to send us a video message. So we have with us Sanai Okamoto, who is a behavioral scientist from the United Nations University. So I will just put on the video. She was supposed to be in person, but technology helped us to get her with us online. So a minute of your time will be required.
Good afternoon, everyone in Montreal. Thank you, Keiko-san, for inviting me to this very important session. I'm Sanai Okamoto from United Nations University, UNMRI. I'm a behavioral scientist with a background in psychology and neuroscience. I have been working on the topic of climate resilience and behavioral change for environmental action with the cities and communities, and also with the private sectors. I got to know Keiko-san via the UN side event I hosted at the COP27 in November to discuss about the mental health impact of climate change. I'm so delighted to have this opportunity to contribute to this this very important session. Unfortunately, I could not travel to Montreal on time, so I'm sharing this video, and I'm happy to receive any questions or comments via email. First of all, I must admit I'm not often practicing religion in my daily life. However, as a Japanese, grew up in Japan, I practice social and cultural norms based on religions, such as Shinto, Buddhism, as well as I also have a sort of indigenous native beliefs of the spirituality that we Japanese people often have towards nature, landscapes such as oceans, mountains, rivers, and so on. And undeniably, I have also learned the power of nature through experiencing beautiful cherry blossoms and autumn leaves, but also through countless numbers of earthquakes, typhoons, heavy snows, and heavy rains, and floods. And as we are all aware, the intensity of these natural disasters has increased in the last decades due to human-induced climate change and the loss of biodiversity. And large volume of natural landscapes and species of flora and fauna that we have taken for granted have been lost, unfortunately by our own being. It is often assumed that the behavior harmful to the natural environment takes place because people either are not aware of the negative impacts their actions have, or because they have performed beliefs that counter the fact, or they think the short-term gains from committing to harmful actions is larger than the cost they bear for committing to pro-environmental actions. One of the solutions has been that the behavior change, and it requires fact-based information to increase public awareness by education or communication. But some scholars argue that environmental knowledge in itself does not lead to environmental behavior, while intention to be environmental may. Creating a good intention and then moving from intention to action often encounters several challenging factors. Transformation or reawakening of individual values and motivations, confirmation of social norms, external validation from respected sources, and most importantly, individuals need to have sufficient capacity and control to effect change. We call it the intention-action gap. Those factors relate strongly to the reason why this session is so important, because it will potentially reach out to several faith leaders and religious institutions, because more than 80% of the human population follows the faith, because faith really influences beliefs, understanding, and preferences, because faith offers behavioral reinforcing resources and interactions, and because faith provides some of the oldest moral frameworks for social action. But as an individual myself, I have experienced changing my own behavior is still not so easy. For instance, I want to eat healthy, I want to exercise more, want to work and study harder, and want to do better recycling. I have good intentions, but often I miss achieving them. And maybe some of you may also have experienced similar problems. And taking this great opportunity, I would like to share some of the insights from behavioral science to facilitate behavioral change towards environmental action. I would like to give an example here from my current ongoing work on plastic waste recycling with local communities. Our waste that are ended up in nature has been considered as one of the most iconic environmental threats in recent years. These pictures make us wonder what we have done to our nature. If you look at plastic waste as an example, recent reports estimate only about just 9% of plastics that have been ever produced were recycled. The rest of more than 90% were ended up like this. And at the same time, we still keep producing and using plastics. And one of the pro-environmental actions we can take in our individual level in our daily lives to this challenge is making sure our wastes are properly sorted to be recycled, but not litter, especially for the countries that have a capacity to recycle these waste. However, very little amount is collected to be recycled in many of the areas. So unfortunately, people's good intentions don't always translate into great action. Especially the challenge of enabling us to recycle, we have a 3D problem: diffuse, distant, delay. Diffuse or difficult, unclear what to do to recycle, what it is, what would be the consequences of recycling or not recycling. Distant. The real landfill sites are not often nearby or even relocated in different countries or not directly visible. Delayed. Doing recycle does not have immediate visible impact in the short term for many people, so people lose attention to keep doing it. How can we solve these problems? Many behavioral scientists, together with the governments, cities, policymakers, civil societies, have been working to progress on our recycling behavior, and some examples can be seen like this. We can make it clear, specific, and local as possible with using visuals, colors, vivid information in the neighborhood. To keep people's motivation, we also need to show progress and give a reward from time to time. And making it fun would also work effectively. Maybe you have seen such things in your city. Some people even walk around to far locations to collect cigarette butts to vote for their favorite players. And we can also nudge the behavior by altering the available options. Several researchers investigated to change the size of the plates to aim for healthy eating habits and less food waste. And most importantly, many of the restaurant business achieved less food waste programs, reduce the cost of purchasing extra food ingredients, but the customer satisfaction stayed high. And there are many different behavioral intervention techniques like that in many areas of the world. And these effects are developed based on solid scientific evidence and have certain levels of success and efficiencies. However, to keep up pro-environmental action, education communications through trusted and influential voices are essential. Therefore, we see the great opportunity here. Beliefs and faith can be a powerful tool for behavioral change towards pro-environmental action. Several studies indicated that when religious support people to set specific goals based on faith, people monitor themselves and are more disciplined in meeting them. In some, protecting biodiversity requires a massive shift in attitude and behavior. So merging pro-environmental action and faith-based goals may be a critical avenue for effective behavioral change at the scale required. Thank you very much for listening, and I'm happy to receive questions and comments via emails. Have a very good afternoon, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sanai, for sending us that message, for being with us even though it was virtual. And we're very glad that Sanai was actually able to share her perspectives, particularly as a behavioral scientist, because her work does quite literally focus on why people do what they do and how we can bring about greater behavioral change, particularly in terms of protecting our planet and working towards climate justice, towards biodiversity conservation, and towards stopping pollution. So thank you once again, Sanai, for being with us today. And thank you so much to all of our panelists for sharing your unique perspectives with us. We have questions from our online audience, but before that, I'll just open the floor to our in-person audience if anyone has any questions. Yes.
Thank you so much.
Be careful.
Hello, friends. Thank you so much. I came a little late, but I just want to say thank you for giving me space.
Closer to your mouth.
So my question is, how big of a role, because we're here on Turtle Island, as some activists would call it, and in this region, the spirituality of the Hiawatha Wampum, if you know what that is, it talks about the unification of the people of the region, and it talks about how there was this evil spirit that was going to be coming to Turtle Island. And so in the form of other religions, there is talk about white people and white supremacy, and how much of an influence does white supremacy in religion affect this climate crisis?
Yes.
Thank you very much for your question.
So I think that we're all very aware that there are some major societal shifts taking place around the world right now, especially in favor of some very authoritarian attitudes, a lot of fear of the other, and some, as an American, I can speak to, we are seeing some very big divisions across American society, and some of that division does seem to be at least sometimes rooted in some supremacist ideologies. And I think that we can look at that as potentially some of the policies that seem to be rooted in some of these ideologies can sometimes be policies of attempting to go back in time to a time when things were a certain way, when certain groups felt more empowered over other groups, and that time that people sometimes want to go back to is also rooted in very high levels of extractivism, to high levels of overuse of our environment and overdevelopment of habitat and reduction of habitat, and a very a use-based society, utilitarian focus towards nature, as opposed to trying to progress to change and to try to change our economy. And that's something that the Feminist Action for Climate Justice Coalition focuses on, as a green economic transition. And so I think that change, obviously, is scary, but it's also often founded in ideas of increased equity, right? We're looking for gender equity, for really examining some of the inequities across all of our society, equity issues that lead to poverty, and starting to break down those issues as a way to help us move towards not just a sustainable planet, but a planet where we're restoring what we've lost. So I think that it's really important to look at what people are afraid of, the direction that our society is going, and how we can really look together to really speak to what people love deeply, and then connect that to progressing together to not just a society that we're improving our environmental outcome, but we're really improving narratives of equity and equality and a just transition. Does anyone else want to take it? Anyone else want to take that?
All right, I'll actually give an example as well. So one of the communities, like with my organization, Green Hope Foundation, we work in is the Sundarbans, which is the world's largest mangrove forest in between India and Bangladesh, both countries that were colonized. And one of the more colonial aspects that stayed on was the exploitation of nature and destroying the mangrove ecosystems in order for urbanization, to build cities for so-called development, but really leaving behind the indigenous people there. But when we actually go really deep into the Sundarbans, one of the most beautiful aspects that has stayed on is their worship of Bono Bibi, who is the lady of the forest when you translate it to English. And she is the deity that protects them from the tiger, from the hurricanes and the typhoons. And that is something that stayed on despite, colonialism, despite the fact that there were these people who were trying to oppress them. So yes, there sadly has been a lot of unwanted change in these communities in terms of colonization happening, and that has led to the destruction of lives and livelihoods. But at the same time, there are examples of these beautiful aspects of taking care of nature and of each other that have kind of stayed on, and that really it's time for us to really bring that to the forefront, because we as human beings used to live in harmony with nature for quite some time. And suddenly somewhere we went wrong. So yeah, thank you for bringing up that question. I think it addresses a very important aspect. And with that, I think if anyone else has any questions in person, and if not, okay, if not, then we have one question. It's from our online audience, which is, many people misinterpret the concept of humans as stewards of the planet and think that means humans have dominion over the planet, which then justifies exploitation because they think their religion calls for it. How do you suggest we change that perspective? Yes.
Well, as a classroom teacher for more than 40 years, I'm aware that not only are, first, most people do not know what the actual teachings of religions other than their own are. But what I've also discovered is people don't even know the teachings of their own religions. And I actually, since college students are at an age, high school and college students are at an age where they're very keenly aware of hypocrisy on the part of their elders. There's in my church or in my spiritual community, I noticed that people weren't actually practicing what the religion is teaching. And the only answer to that is, you're absolutely right. So in order to, sort of get ready at the very beginning of the semester, the first half hour of the course on the survey of the world's religions, I would say to the students, an awful lot of people don't follow the teachings of their own religions, even if they do know what they are. So the answer to the question is, you're absolutely right. People they may know the teachings perfectly well, or they may be ignorant of the teachings, but they are distorting, and this applies to white supremacy also. They are distorting what the religion actually teaches, whatever that religion may be. And so I have reviewed what the research shows actually are the teachings. The world's religions do not teach that we should dominate, oppress, and destroy nature. And all of the theological homework has been done, but people need to attend to it, and they need to be sincere in their actions and walk the talk.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Would any of our other panelists like to take yes?
Yeah, thank you. Just to note that I think that stewardship and exploitation can go hand in hand. I mean, we need to exploit our resources in order to survive. It's over-exploitation. It's unsustainable exploitation that is really taking us to this crisis point. So I would say, if you can demonstrate from a practical point of view, not from a philosophical point of view, if you can demonstrate that you can get the same out of nature, the same out of the same value, the same level of service that you need, without actually degrading it, but actually regenerating it so that future generations have an opportunity that you had today. Thank you.
Sure. Anyone else would like to? Would you? Yes.
Yeah, I think there is so much that we all have homework to do, and I just wanted to reinforce and strengthen what was already said, that if we take the time to really deep and meditate on our own religion's text, that is a foundation. It is, and something else is, I think we also have to be a little bit more patient and forgiving with our species itself, and also recognize and be, and also what science has shown us, that we haven't always lived in harmony with nature. There has been civilizations in many places that have hunted species to extinct, that have destroyed the very natural resources that they depended on, and they have collapsed. They have disappeared. The difference was that there were other places where other communities, either you could migrate and leave that space to regenerate or to recover. We could use now that we literally are in an age where we can deliberate and learn from each other on a global scale.
Yeah, that is so true. We live in an age where, yes, as you mentioned, we are able to connect with one another. We are able to share best practices. We are able to put those into practice, and it's really time for us to leverage that. But thank you so much for all of your responses. We are close to the end of our session, so what I will do is give each of our panelists about 1 to 2 minutes to just give your concluding remarks and any reflections on today's discussion. So I'll just go in this order. So Kusumita, would you like to start us off?
Thank you so much. The book, Faith for Earth, A Call for Action, that was published in 2020, is available as a free to download PDF from the UN Environment Program website, and also from the Parliament of the World's Religions website. So each of you can have your own copy. If you have a class, no matter how many students are in the class, a discussion group, some people love to have the book for their own personal reference and reading, because it doesn't just have a summary of points of agreement for the religions. It has several pages for each religion with the essential passages and, you know, best practices and so forth. It's very, very beautifully designed by Michael Mahan, and I want to say our executive editor, Tatiana Brailovskaya, also did a fabulous job. I'm a co-author with David Hales of the book. So please use the book. We'd like it to go all over the world. And it also, half of the book is a scientific summary of the issues, the environmental issues, with much reference to the work of UNEP. So I'm just, my final comment is please get our book as a free PDF and make use of it. Thank you.
Thanks. I just want to make 3 concluding points. One is from a really personal perspective. So I grew up in a household that was half Christian, half Jewish. And one of the overriding messages, though, across those 2 religions when I was growing up was to really, really reflect on how well we treat other people and each other. And then to reflect harder. And then to look even harder. And to dive deep on what we're doing, whether it's products we use or whatever, that are exploiting people who aren't close to us, who aren't in our own neighborhoods, and who are maybe halfway across the world. And I think that's a big piece of the puzzle, is that we're not going to solve our problems with nature until we learn how to properly treat each other, and until humans stop exploiting one another in ways that are harmful. I don't know that we'll be able to repair the way that we our relationship with other creatures. The other thing the second point I want to bring up is that I think that the UN General Assembly recognizing the human right to a sustainable and healthy environment in September is really critical. And I think we really have to take that to heart and really think about what that means in both a practical and a spiritual sense. And the third thing is that from the UN Women Feminist Action for Climate Justice Action Coalition gender equality lens, I think that we really need to continue this conversation of what it means to ensure that we have gender equality in not just these discussions and decision-making processes, but in the implementation of solutions. We all have to be at the table together. Thank you.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with your first point, that it's really care for nature and care for humanity is intertwined, and one cannot go with the other. And I think even that in my experience in interfaith dialogues and in conversations with people of different faiths, the topic of nature and and stewardship is one which is so easy to rally around. It's one of the easiest ways to bring people together and connect across cultures, across faiths. And if there is one thing that we need in this day and age, is things that bring us together.
Yes, so if you're at all interested in the land and livelihoods perspective, I would encourage you to look at the UNCCD's latest Global Land Outlook, and you will see that it really tries to bring together the social, the economic, the financial, and the nature dimensions, and see how there's a potential for alignment that would give us this regenerative restoration economy that is just it's not solely economic, but it's something that transcends that. And so I think that would be my final perspective. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you so much to all of our panelists for being with us here today, for sharing your perspectives on this very, very important topic. And I think all of you have come in from different areas of work, different fields of study, but one of the common things that really stood out was that we need to be able to have respect for our nature. We need to understand that we can't, if we as human beings don't understand how interconnected we are with each other, with nature, with Mother Nature, we can't really go anywhere, because when we're destroying Mother Earth, we're inadvertently destroying ourselves as well. And that is something we really need to take a look at. And it is strange because, as our panelists have spoken about today, every single religion, the spiritualities, the indigenous cultures all talk about empathy, love, respect, compassion for our fellow human being, for our planet, for all living beings, really. So it is really sad that we've come to a point where, we've kind of forgotten that we're so readily exploiting all of our resources just for development. In 1987, when the Brundtland Report was released, it defined sustainable development as one that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And that is essentially what our faiths have been telling us for such a long time, that yes, if we do live in harmony with nature, and if we do utilize any kind of natural resources, it's important for us to ensure that it's regenerative, that it's regenerated for future generations as well, to allow them to enjoy that same beauty of Mother Nature. So we really need to take a look at where we are right now. We need to learn from the mistakes of our past, and we need to celebrate the actions that we have already taken so that we can share best practices, we can come together as humanity, we can have a more inclusive dialogue, bringing in stakeholders from faith-based organizations to governments and civil society to women to young people, and really recognize the diversity of humankind so that together we can create a more sustainable world, we can preserve our biodiversity, and we can leave behind a world for future generations that is just as pristine as the one that was given to us originally. So thank you once again for being with us here today. Feel free to reach out to us if you have any more questions. Have a wonderful rest of COP15, and we look forward to seeing you on the ground working towards a more sustainable world. Thank you very much.